We want to talk about research presentations or layouts for scene design. If we had an object, we want to talk about the space in which we place that object. The full view of this page allows us the space in which to place our objects. Where we place them says quite a bit to our audience. In this example, the chair is placed more to the left than it is to the right or in the center of the page. Because the left has more inherent motion, it gives this object more power. If we were to place the object center, if we think it has the most emphasis, we're incorrect. The chair to the left gives us more emphasis, more weight on that object. If we place the chair to the right, it's more at rest. It's towards the right. We look left to right, so it's more at a finished point. So what we might say is that the chair that is furthest to the left has the furthest to travel. Therefore, it has more dominance and more power, perhaps, than an object that might be sitting clear over here far on the right. And the object in the center, because we're not sure if it's going left or right, is more of a question mark. So, let's place an object just off center. So it's not quite center, it's off to the right just a little bit. Again, that's not as strong as an object that's just off to the left a little bit. If it is off to the right just a little bit, it's a little more at rest. And if it is off to the left just a little bit, it has more dominance. Now, that's left to right. There's also influence of the full environment around an object and its vertical position. This object is placed lower in the screen, therefore the environment around it has more dominance. The chair feels a little more minuscule. If a chair, instead, were moved up, it dominates the space. The space is still there, but the object is stronger than the space. So all of these placements can help us in communication with a director, fellow designers, a producer, etc. Once we start making presentations, we're going to get more involved. We'll have more than one object within the presentation. Here is a presentation with the chair we saw originally and some other chairs. Perhaps we wanted to talk to a director about a chair we've chosen and some other options. This is perhaps a really good way to do it because I have given the chair that I chose dominance on the screen, and the other ones are in weaker positions off to the side. Also, because I've emphasized the chair by cutting it out, it has dominance too. It's also, if you notice, on top of all the other images. So all of those help give dominance to that chair on the left. So this might be a great display of here's what I've chosen, but here are some other options. It does, however, emphasize the designer's choice. If I place the object in the center with the objects around it, it still is dominant in the sense that it's on top of all the other images, but now we sense that there can be more discussion on perhaps one of these other selections rather than the chair that's in the center, because the chair in the center is not in the strongest position, as it was in this previous look. This is more a discussion about that chair and other options. This one is about, well, here is a chair, but here are other options we should be talking about, and we would spend more time discussing that. If we set it this way, we might still have a chair that maybe someone else chose, and maybe some other options that you might rather have. Again, as we look at those three other options, because one is top left, which has the most inherent motion, and it's on top of all the rest of them, that might actually give preference to that set of red chairs over the other chairs that are in the picture, even the one that's over on the far right. Now let's complicate it a little bit more. Perhaps we're looking at lots of different furniture pieces and some wallpapers that we want to use. Again, looking at all these images, by placing them scattered around the window and by placing them on top of each other, we know this is a discussion board. We're going to have a discussion about this because nothing dominates other than the white table towards the bottom that seems to be on top of all the rest. That's the only thing that gives it dominance. But because it's further down the page, it's not as dominant as a picture at the top of the screen may have been. This is a really good discussion board showing that there's really not a lot of preference to anything on the screen, and we can have a full discussion about each item. If we instead took all the items and separated them so they're not overlapping, we're not talking as much about relationships, we're looking at each choice by itself. Therefore, we could have a full discussions about the bed, and we wouldn't really be talking about the other images at all. We would talk about the bureau, we would talk about each of the wallpapers separately, we would talk about the table, and we would talk about the chair. So these would all be separate discussions, and nothing is taking precedence other than the left to right placement of objects. When you separate them all out, it doesn't give as much dominance to any one object. If we instead place those objects in the same locations, basically, and did more overlapping, you'll see that there's a little more dominance. Now the chair is on top rather than the white table from before. Because it's further up the screen, it's going to dominate just a little bit more. We could also show dominance by giving a different border to one of the objects. So here's this exact same layout, but we have highlighted one of the objects by giving it a different colored border. Now, because it is the accented repetition, so it's accented by the white frame, it'll pull our focus. Here's a more complicated board. Now, this board is a discussion board because things overlap. But notice that things are going to be discussed by category. So the beds will be discussed. I do have a bed that seems to be one of my choice. I can talk about tables and bureaus, but again, I seem to have a table that I like the most. I can talk about chairs, and I have a couple of chairs that I really like the most. And I can talk about wallpapers. Again, maybe with the wallpaper that's my choice. So placement of objects within space definitely has an influence on your choice as a designer, what you want the board to say, choices you would like to make, and the kind of discussion you'd like to have from your presentations. All of these represent research, all of them offer choices, but each one of them shows how placement within the research board helps show your preference and can help guide the conversation.